When police showed up at my front door after 2 a.m., I thought something had happened to my daughter. I never imagined my own parents would be standing outside a crashed car, pointing at her name, telling officers she ran from the scene, a hit and run. My car, their lie, and a plan that would have ruined my child's life to save my sister's image. I stayed silent that night. 3 days later, they realized silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. When you don't expect someone to bang on your front door a little after 2 a.m, the sound doesn't ease you awake. It doesn't drift into your dreams. It hits you hard, like a fist to the chest. I wasn't out drinking. I wasn't hosting anyone. I wasn't living some reckless life that invites chaos. I was in bed, in Savannah, half asleep, half dreaming about a landscaping client who insisted on English ivy, even though her entire property sat on swampy ground that would rot the roots within a year. That's where my mind was. Soil pH, drainage angles, ordinary problems. Down the hall, my 16-year-old daughter, Malene, was asleep. I'd heard her say goodnight at 10. I'd seen her door closed. I'd checked on her the way mothers do, just to confirm the steady rise and fall of her chest. It was a humid, quiet, boring Thursday night, the kind of night where the biggest risk is the air conditioner giving out and turning your house into a sauna. So when the pounding started, heavy and urgent, my first thought wasn't danger. It was confusion. Then the lights came, red and blue, slicing across my ceiling fan in slow, rotating arcs. Silent, relentless. My heart didn't race at first. It stuttered, like my body hadn't caught up to reality yet. I slid out of bed, pulled my robe tight, and moved toward the front door. Each step felt heavier than the last. I checked the peephole. 2 uniformed officers stood on my porch. Their posture wasn't relaxed. Their faces weren't neutral. This wasn't a noise complaint or a welfare check. This was something else. Something already decided. I opened the door but left the chain on. "Can I help you, ma'am?" the older officer asked. "Are you Danielle Vance?" He didn't wait for me to answer. "We need to speak with you regarding a hit-and-run collision involving a 1967 Mustang convertible registered to this address." For a moment, my brain simply stopped working. The words didn't connect. They floated there, detached from meaning. "The Mustang," I said. "My Mustang?" The cherry red restoration project I'd spent 5 years and $65,000 bringing back to life. The car I rebuilt, bolt by bolt, the one that sat in my garage under a dust cover, waiting for weekend drives and car shows I never quite had time for. "It's in the garage," I said. "I have the keys." The officer shook his head. "The vehicle is currently embedded in the stone fountain at Lafayette Square." Embedded. Witnesses identified the driver, fleeing the scene on foot. Fleeing. My car. Someone ran from my car. "Who?" I asked. "We have statements," he said, his eyes drifting past me into the dark hallway behind my shoulder. "From witnesses at the scene." Then he said the sentence that cracked the night clean in half. "They identified the driver as your daughter, Malene Vance." The world tilted, not metaphorically, physically. I had to brace my hand against the doorframe to stay upright. "That's impossible," I said. Malene, who gets anxious ordering pizza over the phone. Malene, who hates driving so much, she intentionally failed her permit test twice because the thought of hurting someone terrified her. Malene, who preferred sketching charcoal portraits to scrolling TikTok. Malene, who avoided conflict so aggressively she once apologized to a chair she bumped into. "We have witness statements, ma'am," the officer repeated, firmer now. "From whom?" I asked, though something cold had already settled in my stomach. "Your parents, Keith and Susan Vance," he said. "And your sister, Lauren. They were at the scene. They saw her run." My parents, my sister, standing in the street at 2 a.m, pointing at my child, telling police she committed a felony. The betrayal didn't feel loud. It felt cold, surgical, like something planned long before that moment. They weren't just witnesses, they were architects. The officers left at 2:45 a.m. I didn't go back to bed. I walked down the hallway and cracked Maline's door open. She was exactly where she should be, curled beneath her weighted blanket, a charcoal sketchbook resting on her chest, pencil smudges still on her fingers, sleeping the heavy, untroubled sleep of a teenager who had spent her night drawing, not destroying property, and fleeing crime scenes. I stood there longer than necessary, listening, watching, memorizing the truth. Before it was twisted beyond recognition, my thoughts shifted, inevitably, to my sister, Lauren. I knew exactly where she had been. The Midsummer Solstice Festival at the Tate Estate. An invite-only event filled with champagne bottles that cost more than my monthly mortgage, and people who never faced consequences because consequences were negotiable. Lauren lived for those nights. She lived for the photos, the stories, the illusion of effortlessness. For 20 years, I had been the invisible hand that cleaned up after her. When she got a DUI in college, I drove 2 hours in the middle of the night to bail her out, so my father's name wouldn't show up in the police blotter. When she accidentally walked out of a boutique wearing a diamond bracelet, I returned it and paid quietly to avoid scandal. When she overextended her credit and panicked, I restructured payments under my name. Lauren was the star, I was the crew. For years, I asked myself why I stayed, why I kept fixing things that weren't mine. The answer wasn't love. It was conditioning. Toxic loyalty doesn't appear overnight. It leaks in slowly. You normalize suffocation until you forget what breathing feels like. My parents taught me that protecting the family image was love, that silence was loyalty, that being strong meant absorbing damage so others didn't have to. I wore that label proudly. Strong, reliable, capable. I didn't realize strong was just their word for convenient. But this time, they hadn't asked me to clean up a mess. They had created one using my property and my child. And that was the moment something fundamental shifted. If you've ever realized too late that your strength was being weaponized against you, drop a comment. I want to know you're here. Say, I see it now. The sun didn't rise so much as it seeped into the house, thin and gray, like it didn't want to be involved. I sat at the kitchen table long before morning officially started, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. I hadn't slept, not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw red and blue lights slicing across the ceiling. Heard the word, fleeing. Felt the weight of my parents' voices, placing blame where it didn't belong. Maline woke up at 6:45, like she always did on school days. I heard her padding down the hall, humming softly. Still half asleep, she stopped in the doorway when she saw me sitting there, still in my robe, hair unbrushed, eyes too sharp. "Mom?" she asked. "Are you okay?" I looked at her and felt something hard settle into place inside my chest. Not fear, not panic, resolve. "I'm fine," I said. "Go get ready for school." She hesitated. Teenagers always know when something is wrong, even when they don't know what it is. But she nodded and went back down the hall. I waited until I heard the shower start before I let myself breathe again. I knew the phone would ring at 8. My parents are nothing if not punctual when control is on the line. They don't panic. They don't react emotionally. They organize. They strategize. They assign roles. At exactly 8 a.m., my phone rang. Not a text, a call. That told me everything. I answered on the second ring and said nothing. I didn't say hello. I didn't say good morning. I just pressed the phone to my ear and waited. "Danielle," my mother said. Her voice was clipped and professional. The voice she used when closing real estate deals or shutting down conversations that inconvenienced her. "We need to handle this situation before it spirals," she continued. "Your father is on the line too." There was a faint click. Then my father's voice joined the call. heavy, authoritative, the voice that had taught me obedience disguised as reason. "Now listen," he said. "We've been looking at the statutes." Of course they had. "Meline is 16, he went on. "She's a minor. If she takes the charge, the records are sealed. Community service. Maybe probation. It disappears when she turns 18. I stared at the coffee maker as it hissed and sputtered, steam rising like it was trying to escape the room. They hadn't asked if Meline was okay. They hadn't asked if I was okay. They hadn't even pretended to question whether she had done it. They had skipped straight to legal math. "And Lauren?" I asked. My voice sounded calm, almost detached. That scared me more than anger would have. "What happens to Lauren?" There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, like I'd asked something profoundly inconvenient. "Lauren has contracts, Danielle," my mother snapped. "She has a swimwear partnership launching next week. A DUI would violate morality clauses. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses. So let me get this straight," I said. "You want my daughter, who is terrified of driving, to confess to a felony she didn't commit so Lauren can sell bikinis." "Don't be dramatic," my father said. "We aren't asking her to go to prison," he continued. "We're asking for a family adjustment. We protect the asset that's vulnerable." The word hung there, heavy and unmistakable. Asset. Lauren was an asset. "Meline is resilient," my mother added. "She's young. She'll bounce back. Bounce back." Like this was a scraped knee. Like they weren't talking about branding my child as a criminal before she even finished high school. "The asset," I repeated quietly. That was the moment everything snapped into clarity. Lauren wasn't the favorite because she was loved more. She was protected because she was profitable. Meline wasn't being sacrificed because she was weak. She was expendable because she didn't generate income. This wasn't about family. It was about return on investment. "She was driving drunk," I said. "She crashed a car I spent 5 years restoring. And you want my child to take the fall?" "It's damage control," my mother said. "We'll pay for the car. We'll cover any fines Meline gets. We just need a united front." The language was flawless, polished, cold. "The police are going to call you back today," she continued. "You corroborate our statement. Say you were asleep. Say you heard the car leave. Say you found the keys missing. Keep it simple." "And if I don't?" I asked. There was a pause. A strategic one. "Then you're choosing to destroy your sister's life," my father said. "And don't expect us to finance your landscape projects next season if you can't be a team player." There it was. The leverage, money, access, conditional support disguised as generosity. I ended the call without saying another word. I didn't slam the phone. I didn't throw it. I simply pressed end. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. Instagram. Lauren had posted a story, a black screen, white text. "Heartbroken by the betrayal I woke up to today. Scary when the people you trust most turn out to be the ones who hurt you. Taking a break to heal." Broken heart emoji. Hashtags about healing. Family trauma. She wasn't hiding. She was preemptively controlling the narrative. Vague enough to invite sympathy. Strategic enough to avoid specifics. She was framing herself as the victim before the truth could surface. I stared at the screen and felt something lift, like fog evaporating under harsh light. I wasn't their daughter. I was their fixer. And Meline wasn't their grandchild. She was collateral. They thought this was a negotiation. They thought they could buy my silence with next season's funding. They didn't know I had the black box. I set my phone down on the granite counter. I didn't cry. Crying implies hurt. And I wasn't hurt anymore. I was focused. I walked into my home office and closed the door. The air inside was cool, smelled faintly of drafting paper and expensive ink. This was my space, my control center, the place where I managed million-dollar municipal projects and negotiated with city councils. My family liked to pretend I was just a gardener who got lucky. They forgot that architect was in the title. I know how to build things, and I know how to dismantle them. I opened my laptop and pulled up my contacts. I typed a name I hadn't used in years, Jeffrey Coles. Jeffrey isn't a family friend. He's a shark in a $3,000 suit. He specializes in reputation management and high-stakes litigation. The kind of attorney you hire when you don't want peace. You want finality. He answered on the first ring. Danielle, he said. It's been a while. I need you on retainer, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. I have a situation involving a hit and run, false police statements, and potential defamation. The opposing parties are Keith, Susan, and Lauren Vance. There was a pause. A pen scratched paper on the other end. Your parents and sister? Yes. Another pause. Are we looking to settle? He asked. Or destroy? We're looking for total, unconditional surrender, I said. They framed my daughter. The air shifted. I'll clear my afternoon, Jeffrey said. Send me what you have. I have something better than statements, I said. I have the black box. If you're still watching, and you can already feel where this is going, type justice in the comments. My parents made a fundamental mistake when they looked at me. They always had. They saw my things as toys, accessories, disposable comforts that existed to support the family image. To them, the Mustang was just a cool vintage prop, a flashy red backdrop for photos. Something Lauren could borrow for a night and return without consequence. But to me, the Mustang was an asset, a tangible one. $65,000 of parts, labor, time, and obsession. 5 years of late nights, 5 years of grease under my fingernails, and restoration manuals spread across the garage floor. When you invest that much into something, you don't leave it unprotected. 3 years earlier, during the final stage of restoration, I had installed a high-fidelity telematics system under the dashboard. It wasn't just a GPS tracker, it was a full security suite designed for high-value collector vehicles, impact detection, location history, engine start logs. And one feature I never mentioned to anyone, cabin audio recording. The system was configured to trigger whenever the engine was running and automatically save footage when a sudden impact occurred. I didn't install it because I distrusted my family. I installed it because I distrusted the world. That distinction mattered. I logged into the cloud portal on my laptop. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger, clouds, judgment. This was clarity. The dashboard loaded. A red notification blinked at the top of the screen. Severe impact detected. 2:17 a.m. I clicked the log. There it was. A 45-minute audio file. It covered the drive from the Tate Estate to Lafayette Square, and 15 minutes after the crash, I stared at the waveform. Peaks and valleys of sound. Proof compressed into digital shape. That file contained the truth. Lauren's voice. My parents' arrival. Their plan. They thought they were in a bubble. They thought the car was just a machine. They didn't know the machine had been listening. Jeffrey was silent on the line while I plugged in my headphones. You ready? He asked. No, I said. But play it anyway. I clicked play. The audio began with the engine roaring to life. A deep, throaty sound I used to love. Tonight, it sounded like a weapon being loaded. Music followed. Bass heavy. Distorted. Too loud for a historic district at 2 a.m. Then Lauren's voice cut through. Guys, look at this interior, she shouted, laughter slurring the edges of her words. This car is vintage everything. I glanced at the timestamp, 2:12 a.m. She wasn't just driving, she was performing. We are literally main characters right now. She laughed. No one drives like this anymore. Jeffrey exhaled slowly. She was live streaming, he said flatly. She broadcast her own DUI. The screech came next. Tires skidding on cobblestone. A sudden spike in the waveform. Metal slamming into stone. Then chaos. Steam hissing. Glass tinkling as it settled. Lauren started sobbing. My phone. Where's my phone? she cried. This stupid car. Footsteps approached. Voices. My parents. I braced myself for panic. Shock. Concern. It didn't come. Is the stream off? My father asked. That was his first question. Not, are you hurt? Not, what happened? Is the stream off? Lauren whimpered something unintelligible. Fix your face. My mother snapped. We need a narrative. I closed my eyes. My father's voice remained calm, controlled, tactical. You were never here, he said. The car was stolen. Lauren protested weakly. It's too late, my mother said. Someone saw you. Another pause. Then, the pivot. Malene. My father said. Same height. 16. Minor record. Sealed. My stomach dropped, even though I already knew. She'll be fine, my mother added. She's resilient. They weren't brainstorming. They were executing. The rest of the recording was procedural. Phone calls. Instructions. Rehearsed lines. Lauren crying about brand deals. My parents reassuring her. Not once did they mention my daughter's well-being. Not once did they hesitate. Jeffrey removed his glasses. This is conspiracy to file a false police report, he said. Insurance fraud. Obstruction. And contributing to the delinquency of a minor. They're criminals, he added. I know, I said. We're going to help them remember that. At 11 a.m., we walked into the police station. My parents sat in the lobby like they were waiting for brunch. Calm, confident. Lauren wore oversized sunglasses and clutched a bottle of water like a prop. Inside the conference room, Detective Miller asked them to repeat their statements. They did, smoothly, without contradiction. Jeffrey connected his laptop. Before you finalize these reports, he said. We're submitting new evidence. He pressed play. Lauren's voice filled the room. Drunk, laughing, confident. Then the crash. Then my parents calmly plotting to frame my child. The room went silent. Detective Miller stood. We're done here, he said. He turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, you have the right to remain silent. My father stared at me. You're destroying your own family, he whispered. No, I said. You did that. I'm just documenting it. The fallout was immediate. Lauren was charged with DUI, leaving the scene and filing a false report. My parents faced obstruction and conspiracy charges. The audio became public record within hours. Journalists found it faster than I expected. Lauren lost her agency, her sponsors, her followers, her beach house deposit. Almost overnight, Jeffrey filed a civil suit. My parents settled quietly for $150,000, a severance package for their own collapse. 6 months later, I sat in my garden. My parents had sold their estate and vanished. Lauren moved to Atlanta under a new name. I hadn't spoken to any of them since the police station. Malene painted beside me. Calm, free. I sold the Mustang for scrap. I didn't need it back. Breaking the cycle isn't loud. It sounds like a paintbrush on canvas. It sounds like breathing. If you believe justice matters even when it costs you family, type "justice served" in the comments. The story didn't explode all at once. It seeped out, quietly at first, like ink bleeding through paper. A local police blotter update. A short court filing posted online. A few lines copied and reposted by someone who knew someone who recognized the last name. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. I didn't answer it. I sat at the kitchen table with Malene across from me, her backpack at her feet, her eyes darting between my face and the window, like she was waiting for something to crash through it. I hadn't told her everything yet. I'd told her enough. That there had been a mistake, that it wasn't her fault, that she was safe. She trusted me, completely. That trust was a weight I felt in my bones. Do I have to go to school? She asked quietly. No, I said. You don't have to go anywhere today. She nodded and pulled her sketchbook closer, like a shield. By mid-afternoon, the story had a headline, not a flattering one. It mentioned my sister's name. her influencer status. The word allegedly appeared exactly once before disappearing from every repost. The audio transcript leaked within hours. Someone clipped the most damning section, the part where my father calmly suggested using my daughter as a legal buffer. That clip went everywhere. It didn't matter how many statements my parents' attorney issued. It didn't matter how many carefully worded apologies Lauren drafted and never posted. The damage was done. Public opinion doesn't wait for court outcomes. It decides fast and hard. Lauren's sponsors dropped her before dinner, one by one. No explanations, no warnings. Just termination emails, citing values misalignment. She called me that night. I let it ring. She texted, "You didn't have to do this." I stared at the words and felt nothing. An hour later, my mother called. Then my father. Then both numbers again. I silenced my phone and put it face down on the counter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't managing their emotions. I wasn't fixing anything. I was letting consequences exist. The next morning, reporters camped outside my parents' old estate. Not my house. They knew where the story was, where the spectacle lived. The gate they'd hidden behind for decades suddenly meant nothing. I watched coverage from my office, muted, while Malene colored quietly on the floor beside my desk. Every time a reporter said my daughter's name, my jaw tightened. Every time they referred to her as the minor falsely accused, I felt a strange mix of fury and relief. The truth was out, but truth doesn't erase damage. It just stops new lies from forming. The district attorney moved fast. There was too much evidence. Too clean. Too public. Lauren's attorney tried to argue intoxication, emotional distress, impaired judgment. The judge wasn't interested. My parents tried to claim confusion, stress, poor recollection in a chaotic moment. The audio destroyed that defense in seconds. You can't claim confusion when you're calmly assigning roles. Behind closed doors, they begged, not for forgiveness, for mercy. They wanted a private settlement, quiet resolutions, sealed records. They wanted the family image back. Jeffrey didn't blink. "No," he said. The civil suit was never about money. The $150,000 they paid was insignificant compared to what they'd lost. Their social standing, their illusion of control, their narrative. I watched my parents age 10 years in 3 weeks. They sold the estate quietly. No farewell party, no announcement, just a listing that vanished after 2 days. Lauren disappeared next. She scrubbed her social media, changed her name, tried to resurface in Atlanta under a different brand. Wellness, healing, accountability. It didn't work. The internet remembers. Malene started therapy in the fall. Not because she was broken, but because trauma doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it settles in like dust. She asked me once if Grandma and Grandpa hated her. "No," I said. "They loved themselves more." She nodded like that answer made sense. And it did. As for me, the quiet was unsettling at first. No calls, no emergencies, no one asking me to fix things. I kept waiting for the familiar pull of obligation to return. It didn't. What replaced it was space. I took fewer contracts, higher quality ones. I stopped saying yes out of reflex. I stopped explaining myself. I built a fence around my property. Literally and metaphorically, the guilt crept in occasionally, late at night, old conditioning whispering that I'd gone too far, that I'd broken something sacred. But then I'd remember the sound of my father's voice on that recording, the calm calculation, the way he spoke about my child like a spreadsheet entry, and the guilt evaporated. 6 months later, I sold the Mustang. Not to restore it, not to salvage it, for scrap. People thought that was dramatic, emotional, wasteful. It wasn't. The car had done its job. I didn't need the symbol anymore. What I needed was peace. And peace, I learned, isn't passive. It's chosen. It's enforced. It's built deliberately. the same way I design landscapes, with boundaries, with intention, with the understanding that not everything gets access. If you've ever been told keeping the peace meant sacrificing yourself or your child, this is your permission slip. Type "I choose peace" in the comments. The strangest part wasn't the silence. It was how quickly my nervous system forgot what constant chaos felt like. For years, my body had been trained to stay alert, waiting for the next call, the next crisis, the next thing that needed fixing. When all of that stopped, my body didn't relax right away. It hovered, like it didn't trust the quiet. The first few weeks after everything collapsed, I woke up every morning at 5:12 a.m. on the dot. No alarm, just habit. My heart would already be racing, braced for a problem that no longer existed. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe, the soft tick of the hallway clock, the hum of the refrigerator, proof that nothing was wrong. That's when it hit me. I had spent decades living in a state of emergency that wasn't mine. Malene adjusted faster than I did. Kids are honest that way. Once the threat is gone, they don't romanticize it. They move forward. She stopped flinching at unexpected sounds. She slept without the weighted blanket for the first time in years. She started leaving her door open at night. One evening, about a month after the arrest, she looked up from her sketchbook and said, "Mom, it's really quiet now." I froze, unsure which direction that sentence was heading. "Is that okay?" I asked. She thought about it, then nodded. "Yeah, I like it." That was the moment I knew I'd done the right thing. The long-term consequences unfolded slowly, not in explosions but in absences. My parents' names stopped coming up in conversations. Invitations that used to include me by default simply didn't arrive anymore. People who had smiled politely at family gatherings suddenly avoided eye contact in public. They didn't know what to say. I didn't need them to. My parents tried once more, about 3 months in. A handwritten letter. No return address. It arrived folded neatly, like a peace offering. I didn't open it. I knew what it would contain. Not accountability, not remorse, just explanations, justifications, a version of events where they were victims of circumstance, pressure, misunderstanding. I wasn't interested in understanding anymore. I shredded it and took the pieces out with the recycling. Lauren never reached out directly again. Everything she did was indirect. Mutual contacts mentioning she was struggling. Vague posts about growth, about lessons learned, about being canceled unfairly. She never said my daughter's name. That told me everything I needed to know. Professionally, something unexpected happened. Clients started treating me differently, with more respect, more caution. They listened when I spoke. They didn't push boundaries the way they used to. Strength hits different when it's no longer exploitable. I raised my rates. I cut my workload by 1/3. I stopped taking jobs that required me to overextend just to prove something. And, slowly, the idea that I was selfish for choosing myself began to lose its grip. Malene's therapist told me something that stuck. She said, "Children don't need perfect parents. They need parents who choose them when it counts." That sentence replayed in my head on the nights when doubt crept in. On the nights when old guilt tried to convince me I'd burned too much down. I hadn't burned anything down. I'd let rot collapse under its own weight. The hardest part wasn't cutting them off. It was accepting that the version of family I'd been fighting to preserve had never existed. I was grieving an idea, not a reality. Once I understood that, the grief softened. We redecorated the house that winter. Not as a symbolic reset, just because it felt right. We painted the hallway a warmer color. I moved my office downstairs so I could keep an eye on Malene when she worked at the dining table. Small changes, intentional ones. Safety isn't dramatic. It's boring, and boring felt like luxury. One afternoon, Malene asked if she could finally take her road test. My heart skipped. "Are you sure?" I asked. She smiled. I think I am now. She passed on the first try. That mattered more to me than any court outcome ever could. Breaking cycles doesn't come with applause. It comes with quiet decisions that compound over time. With choosing discomfort now over damage later. With being willing to be misunderstood by people who benefited from your silence. If you're watching this and you're in that uncomfortable middle space where you know something has to change but you're afraid of what you'll lose, let me say this clearly. You don't lose family by refusing to be sacrificed. You lose access to people who never planned to protect you. Type, "No more sacrifices" in the comments if this hit home. Forgiveness showed up when I wasn't looking for it. Not as a feeling, not as relief, but as a question that people around me kept asking like it was inevitable. Have you forgiven them yet? The first time someone said it, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. As if forgiveness were a box you check once enough time passes. As if what happened was a misunderstanding instead of a calculated decision to destroy a child's future for convenience. I didn't answer the question. I started avoiding it, but the idea lingered. It crept in during quiet moments, during therapy sessions, during late nights when the house was still, and my mind tried to make sense of things that no longer needed explaining. Forgiveness, I learned, is often weaponized against people who finally set boundaries. It's presented as maturity, as healing, as moral superiority, but what most people actually mean is compliance. They want the tension gone. They want the discomfort eased. They want the story wrapped up neatly so they don't have to sit with the ugliness of it. Forgiveness, in those moments, isn't about peace. It's about access, and I was done giving access. My parents tried again in the spring. Not directly. They were smarter than that. They sent an intermediary, a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, someone neutral enough to feel safe. She called under the guise of concern. They're not doing well, she said gently. They're embarrassed. They're hurting. They feel like they've lost their family. I waited. They want to apologize, she continued. They know they made mistakes. Mistakes, not choices. Not crimes. Mistakes. What exactly do they want? I asked. To talk, she said. To clear the air. To move forward. There it was. Move forward meant pretend it didn't happen. Reset the board without accountability. I declined. I'm not available for that, I said. The cousin sounded surprised, almost offended. But they're your parents, and she's my daughter, I replied. The call ended shortly after. That was the last message that came through anyone else's mouth. After that, they tried silence as a strategy, waiting me out, assuming time would soften me. That guilt would do the work they couldn't. It didn't. Boundaries, once enforced, have a way of strengthening themselves. Each time I chose not to engage, the choice became easier, less dramatic, more automatic. Malene noticed. You don't get that tight look on your face anymore when the phone rings, she said one evening. I hadn't realized I ever did. Therapy became less about processing trauma and more about rebuilding trust in my own instincts. I had ignored them for years in the name of peacekeeping. I'd learned to override my internal alarms because they were inconvenient to others. Now, I listened. That changed everything. I stopped explaining my decisions, stopped defending them, stopped offering context to people who hadn't earned it. No is a complete sentence when you don't need approval. Professionally, the shift was just as pronounced. I turned down a lucrative contract because the client dismissed my boundaries as overreactions. Old me would have swallowed it. New me didn't. I walked away. The fear that followed surprised me. A brief flash of old programming whispering that I'd made a mistake, that I'd regret it. 2 weeks later, a better contract came through. One with clear expectations, mutual respect, no games. Boundaries don't shrink your world, they refine it. One night, Malene asked me something I'd been dreading. Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will ever say they're sorry? I considered lying. It would have been easier, but I didn't. I don't know, I said. But even if they do, that doesn't mean they get access to us. She nodded slowly. I don't want to see them, she said. I just wanted to know. That was it. No tears, no drama, just clarity. Children don't need reconciliation to heal. They need safety. That's the part adults often forget. Forgiveness, when it comes, should never precede accountability. And it should never be demanded by people who refuse to change. If forgiveness ever happens for me, it will be quiet, private, internal. It won't come with reunions or explanations or second chances that risk my child's well-being. It will look like indifference, and indifference is earned. I used to think forgiveness was something you gave to others. Now I know it's something you give yourself when you stop reopening wounds to prove you're healed. If you've ever been pressured to forgive someone who never took responsibility, type "forgiveness isn't access" in the comments. The confrontation everyone expects never came. There was no dramatic showdown, no final screaming match, no moment where I stood across from my parents or my sister and delivered a perfectly worded speech about betrayal and boundaries and consequences. For a long time, I thought that moment was missing, that something was unfinished. Then I realized the absence was the point. People raised in functional families believe closure comes from conversations, from apologies, from mutual understanding. But when you grow up inside a system built on control, confrontation isn't resolution, it's fuel. It gives people like my parents what they want most: engagement. They thrive on reaction, on explanation, on emotional labor. I starved them of it. That was the real victory. There were moments when I imagined what I would say if I ever saw them again. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because my nervous system still remembered the old scripts, the instinct to justify myself, to prove I was right, to explain why what they did was unforgivable. Then one afternoon, while grocery shopping of all places, I ran into someone who knew them, not a close friend, just an acquaintance from their old social circle. She hesitated when she saw me, smiled awkwardly, asked about work, about Savannah, about Malene. Then she leaned in and said quietly, "They're devastated. They don't understand how things went so wrong." I didn't respond right away. I stood there holding a basket of lemons, the absurd normalcy of the moment grounding me. "They understand," I said finally. "They just don't like the outcome." Her face flickered with something like surprise, maybe even relief, like she'd been waiting to hear someone say it out loud. That was the closest thing to a confrontation I ever needed, because the truth is, people who manipulate don't need explanations. They need limits. And limits don't require dialogue. They require consistency. The longer I stayed silent, the more the narrative shifted around them. Not in my favor, in reality's favor. Without me feeding the story, there was nothing left to spin. People stopped asking questions, stopped probing, stopped trying to mediate. Silence works when you let it. Malene grew taller that year. Not just physically, emotionally. She stopped apologizing for existing, stopped shrinking when adults spoke. She started signing her sketches with her full name instead of initials. One night, she taped a finished piece to the refrigerator. A charcoal drawing of two figures standing inside a circle of light. "What is it?" I asked. "Boundaries," she said simply. I smiled and let it be that. The absence of confrontation did something unexpected. It rewired how I saw myself. I wasn't the fixer anymore, not the mediator, not the buffer between chaos and consequences. I was just a mother, a professional, a person who made decisions and lived with them without narrating every step. That simplicity felt radical. There were moments when anger resurfaced, when something small would trigger the memory of what they tried to do to my child. But the anger passed faster now. It didn't need somewhere to go. It didn't need to be expressed. It dissolved. That's what happens when you stop feeding the past. The final transformation wasn't about becoming harder, or colder, or detached. It was about becoming selective. Selective with time, with energy, with access. I didn't shut my heart down. I just locked the doors and handed out keys intentionally. Malene and I built new traditions. Quiet ones. Weekend walks. Art shows. Sunday mornings with no plans. We didn't talk about my parents unless she brought them up. And eventually, she stopped. They faded into context instead of center stage. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the humidity settle into the air, Malene asked me a question that caught me off guard. Do you ever miss them? I thought carefully before answering. I miss who I thought they were, I said. I don't miss who they actually are. She nodded like that distinction mattered. Because it did. There is power in letting the final confrontation die of starvation. No speeches. No ultimatums. No explanations. Just a life lived well without them. If you've ever realized that walking away quietly was stronger than proving your point, type "silence is power" in the comments. Peace didn't arrive all at once. It didn't crash into my life like a revelation. It moved in slowly, the way sunlight does when you stop closing the curtains. At first, I didn't even recognize it. I thought something was missing. Some urgency, some pressure, some internal voice telling me what I should be fixing next. It took time to understand that what I was feeling wasn't emptiness. It was space. Space where panic used to live. Space where guilt used to sit on my chest. Space where obligation had once dictated every decision I made. That space was unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things can feel dangerous when you've spent a lifetime surviving chaos. I caught myself inventing problems just to feel useful. Overworking projects, rechecking emails that didn't need replies, saying yes out of habit instead of intention. The old programming didn't vanish overnight, but each time I noticed it, I stopped, and the stopping rewired something fundamental. Malene noticed the difference before I did. You don't rush anymore, she said one morning while we were eating breakfast. You used to rush even when we weren't late. I smiled because she was right. My body no longer moved like it was bracing for impact. Her confidence continued to grow in quiet, measurable ways. She started submitting her art to local shows. Small ones at first. Community spaces. Coffee shops. She didn't ask for validation the way she used to. She asked for logistics. Deadlines. Hanging requirements. She wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. That mattered. We talked less about the past and more about the future. Not in big, dramatic terms. Just practical conversations. College options. Travel ideas. What kind of life felt good instead of impressive? For the first time, I wasn't modeling endurance. I was modeling choice. That shift changed how Malene saw adulthood. She didn't associate growing up with sacrifice anymore. She associated it with agency. Professionally, my reputation solidified into something different. People didn't see me as endlessly accommodating. They saw me as precise, decisive, reliable. Boundaries had sharpened my value. I stopped over-explaining. I stopped negotiating my worth. I delivered what I promised and declined what didn't align. Clients respected that clarity. So did colleagues. Even my voice changed, slower, more deliberate, less apologetic. I realized something important during that time. Peace isn't passive, it's active maintenance. It's choosing not to reopen doors just because someone knocks louder. It's recognizing old patterns and refusing to step back into them. It's trusting that the life you're building doesn't require constant defense. I didn't need to watch my parents' downfall unfold anymore. I didn't need updates. I didn't need closure. Their absence became background noise, and that, I realized, was the final stage of healing. Indifference, not bitterness, not resentment, just neutrality. They had become irrelevant to my daily decisions. Malene and I planted a small herb garden that spring. Basil, rosemary, thyme. We talked about how plants respond to consistent care. how they don't thrive on neglect or overwatering. You can't force growth, she said thoughtfully. No, I agreed. You just give it the right environment. That sentence stayed with me, because that's what I had finally done for both of us. I had changed the environment. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the air cooled enough to sit outside comfortably, I realized I hadn't thought about my parents or sister all day. Not once. That realization felt like freedom. Not the loud, cinematic kind, the real kind, the kind that shows up quietly and stays. If you've ever wondered what life looks like after you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, this is it. It's calm. It's focused. It's yours. Type "I'm choosing peace" in the comments if this resonates. The final reckoning didn't come from a courtroom, or a phone call, or an apology that never arrived. It happened quietly, on an ordinary afternoon, when I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. I was no longer waiting, not waiting for regret to hit them, not waiting for justice to feel complete, not waiting for validation from anyone outside my own walls. That waiting had been the last thread tying me to them, and it snapped without drama. For years, even after the truth came out, a part of me stayed alert, watching, measuring, wondering if they would finally understand what they'd done, if one day my phone would ring with a voice on the other end that sounded different, smaller, honest. That call never came, but what surprised me was how little it mattered once I stopped expecting it. Healing doesn't end with forgiveness or confrontation. It ends when your nervous system stops scanning the horizon for danger that no longer exists. I noticed the change in subtle ways. I stopped rehearsing conversations that would never happen. I stopped imagining how I'd respond if I ran into them. I stopped needing my story to be understood by people who had already decided their version was more convenient. My internal dialogue quieted. That silence wasn't empty. It was stable. Malene felt it too. One night, while we were cleaning up after dinner, she said, "I don't think about them anymore." She said it casually, like she was talking about a show she stopped watching. I froze for a moment, then nodded. "That's okay," I said. It was more than okay. It was proof that the cycle had broken exactly where it needed to. Children don't need villains to heal. They need safety, consistency, and adults who don't pull them back into old wounds to prove a point. I had done that, and in doing so, I had finally done something my parents never could. I chose responsibility over reputation. That choice had ripple effects I hadn't anticipated. I became more honest in all areas of my life. Not brutally honest, just clear. When something didn't work, I said so. When something mattered, I protected it. I no longer softened truths to keep other people comfortable. That didn't make me harsh. It made me trustworthy. People knew where they stood with me. There was no subtext, no manipulation, no emotional debt. I used to believe strength meant endurance, absorbing impact, staying upright no matter how much damage I took. I was wrong. Strength is discernment, knowing what deserves your energy and what doesn't, knowing when to engage and when to walk away without leaving a trail of explanations behind you. The cycle didn't break the night the police came. It didn't break when the audio went public. It broke when I stopped needing my parents to be different in order for me to move forward. That was the moment I reclaimed ownership of my life. Malene's future no longer carried the weight of my past. She wasn't growing up in reaction to trauma. She was growing up in response to possibility. That distinction matters. I saw it in how she talked about her goals. Not defensively, not cautiously, but openly. As if the world was something to engage with, not survive. That was the legacy I wanted. Not resilience born from damage, but confidence built on safety. There's a lie we're taught about family. That blood outweighs behavior. That history excuses harm. That endurance is proof of love. It isn't. Love that requires silence is control. Love that demands sacrifice is exploitation. Love that survives only when one person absorbs all the damage isn't love at all. I didn't destroy my family. I refuse to let it destroy my child. That choice will always matter more than appearances. If you're watching this and you're standing at the edge of a decision you know will change how people see you, hear this clearly. You are not obligated to carry what never belonged to you. Type, "The cycle ends with me," in the comments if you're ready to choose differently. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens or verdicts. Sometimes it settles in quietly, long after the noise fades, when you realize the people who tried to control your life no longer have access to it. That realization came to me on an unremarkable morning. No court dates, no emails, no reminders of what had been lost or exposed. Just sunlight filtering through the kitchen window while Malene packed her bag for school, humming under her breath. The normalcy of it stopped me in my tracks. This was what justice looked like, not revenge, not humiliation, not watching others suffer. Freedom. For years, justice had been framed to me as something external, something decided by authorities, something granted or denied by systems built to measure wrongdoing. And yes, the law had done its part. The truth had surfaced. Accountability had followed. Consequences had landed where they belonged. But that wasn't the justice that mattered most. The justice that mattered was internal. It was the moment I stopped explaining myself, the moment I stopped feeling responsible for outcomes I didn't create, the moment my daughter stopped being a chess piece in someone else's game. That was the win. I used to believe that ending a cycle required confrontation, that you had to name the harm out loud, demand acknowledgement, force people to see what they'd done. What I learned instead is that cycles don't end when abusers understand. They end when you withdraw consent. Consent to participate, consent to absorb damage, consent to carry narratives that were never yours. The day I stopped consenting, everything else followed naturally. Malene flourished in ways I hadn't even dared to hope for. Her art became bolder, her voice steadier. She stopped asking permission to exist. She started applying to programs that scared her a little, the healthy kind of fear, the kind that signals growth, not danger. One afternoon, she looked at me and said, "I don't feel like I owe anyone anymore." I knew exactly what she meant. Neither did I. That's when I understood something else. My parents didn't lose their power the day they were exposed. They lost it the day I stopped orienting my life around their reactions. The day their approval became irrelevant. Power doesn't disappear when it's taken. It disappears when it's ignored. People sometimes ask if I regret how things ended, if I wish there had been a softer resolution, a quieter way through. The answer is no. Softness would have cost my daughter her future. Quiet would have required my silence. And silence was the currency they used to keep the system running. I chose something different. I chose justice that protected the innocent, not the image. I chose peace that didn't require denial. I chose identity rooted in values, not roles assigned by others. The Mustang is gone. The house feels lighter. The air moves differently when you're no longer bracing for impact. I didn't replace what was lost. I outgrew it. Breaking the cycle didn't make me colder. It made me precise. And precision is what safety looks like when you've lived too long inside chaos. If you're still watching this, you already know why this story matters. It's not about cars or influencers or courtrooms. It's about the moment you realize that loyalty without protection is a trap, that family without accountability is just proximity, and that choosing justice doesn't make you cruel. It makes you responsible. Responsible to the next generation, responsible to yourself, responsible to the truth. So here's the justice call to action. If you believe protecting your child matters more than protecting reputations, type justice in the comments. If you've ever walked away from people who expected you to be the sacrifice, let your story be seen below. And if you want more stories about breaking cycles, choosing truth, and reclaiming your life without apology, subscribe, because justice isn't about punishment, it's about ending the pattern, and peace is the proof.